We welcome you all to our virtual midweek program. Today, we have His Grace Shyam Bihari Prabhu, who will be continuing the series that we have on the great devotees of the Lord. Last week, we discussed the personality Jada Bharat, and this week, we are going to be discussing Mahārāja Ambarīṣa, who is known to have engaged all his senses and his limbs of his body in the service of the Lord. And there's a wonderful pastime as well. And of course, as I mentioned, we have Shyam Bihari Prabhu, who is a senior member of our community, a disciple of Radhanath Maharaj, His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. He's both first and second initiated. He has completed his Bhakti Shastri as well. So there can be no better person to describe Mahārāja Ambarīṣa at ISKCON Atlanta this week. So I will hand it over to Prabhu to enlighten us on this wonderful subject of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my most humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. My most humble obeisances and gratitude to the authorities at the our temple, the Hare Krishna temple, and also to the organizers of this program, His Grace Rangesh Prabhu, His Grace Karthik Prabhu, His Grace Naveen Prabhu, for putting together this wonderful series of talks by all the speakers from our Atlanta temple, and for keeping us connected, as well as for educating us on the Shastras as well. We are very grateful for this program, which is held every Wednesday of every week, and it is surely very enlightening to hear from wonderful devotees of Atlanta. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. So before I start, I would like to offer my most humble obeisances to all the gathered Vaishnavas. Thank you. And being unqualified, I just will attempt to speak a few words to glorify Ambarīṣa Maharaj, who is one of the most exalted devotees in the Shastras and Srimad Bhagavatam, and he inspires us in our bhakti in various ways. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadhati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapad Kamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatanvitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savdutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhavitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Radhanath Swami Niti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Dishatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I hope everyone can hear me clearly. Rankesh, Prabhu, can you hear me? Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
Prabhu.
The Srimad Bhagavatam is said to be the essence of all scriptures. The Srimad Bhagavatam provides us with all the wonderful pastimes of the Lord and the loving exchanges between the Lord and his devotees. There are such wonderful pastimes and such wonderful stories of these loving exchanges in the Srimad Bhagavatam that one who reads the Srimad Bhagavatam is sure to be attracted to the lotus feet of the Lord and to take shelter of the Lord. And in this lifetime itself, achieve the highest goal of human life, which is to return home back to Godhead and serve the lotus feet of Sri Radha and Sri Krishna. That is the goal of human life. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is the source, is our inspiration, is the media by which we can actually achieve the goal of human life. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that it starts itself with the devotees of the Lord. It talks about Krishna and the Pandavas. The war, the Mahabharata war is over, and the Srimad Bhagavatam starts there, talking about the Pandavas and talking about how Krishna is preparing to return from Hastinapur back to Dwarka to his family, and gives us beautiful prayers of Kunti Devi. It gives us the beautiful pastime of Parikshit Maharaj, how Krishna saves him in the womb before he returns back to Dwarka. Then we see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as we progress, we see the wonderful episode of Dhruva Maharaj and his material aspirations. In order to fulfill his material aspirations, he takes instruction from his mother and from Narada Muni and performs great austerities. And because of that austerities, Lord Vishnu himself is forced to come and give his darshan to this wonderful devotee. He fulfills all of Dhruva Maharaj's material desires, as well as gives him such high benedictions so that he can achieve the spiritual world. As we progress in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see the wonderful episode of Prithu Maharaj, who is manifesting from the good qualities of King Vena. And this Prithu Maharaj was responsible for 99 yagyas. He could not perform the 100th yagya because of Indra's envy, but he does perform all these wonderful yagyas for the welfare of his citizens. And then we know that Prithu Maharaj is the one who really organized this whole earth planet, flattened it, and created townships and roads and all wonderful things. One of the first Maharajas on this planet to do that, so that what we see today is kind of an fallout from everything that Prithu Maharaj did in a good way, because we have wonderful roads and cities and villages and all set farming, etc., nicely organized. This was all put together by Prithu Maharaj. And then after Prithu Maharaj, we see the wonderful Rishabh Gita. When Rishabh Dev comes, he speaks the instructions to his sons. Beautiful instructions, helping all of us to achieve perfection in this life and go back home, back to Godhead. So many things that we practice, so many things that we know about are coming from Rishabh Dev's instructions to his sons. There is the wonderful pastime of Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj is considered as the greatest devotee in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Even when Mahaprabhu was on this planet, he used to listen and talk about the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. He would listen to Gadadhar Pandit, who used to read the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he would always want to hear the pastime of Prahlad Maharaj, would keep telling him to repeat and repeat and repeat. So Prahlad Maharaj gave us the 9 limbs of bhakti, and he showed us through his example how we should be dependent upon the Lord, and the Lord always protects us. So these wonderful devotees of the Lord have these wonderful loving exchanges in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and Prahlad Maharaj is especially favored in the Srimad Bhagavatam. When we come to the 9th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadeva Goswami introduces us to the most exalted king, I should say, who is King Ambarīṣa, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. Ambarīṣa Mahārāja is the son of, I should say, Vaivashvata Manu had a son whose name was Nabhaga, and Nabhaga had another son whose name was Nabhaga, and his son was Mahārāja Ambarīṣa. Mahārāja Ambarīṣa was always very pious, very surrendered, very dependent on the Lord for everything. He was the king of the entire world, all the 7 islands in this world. He was the king of the entire world, and he had opulences like you cannot even imagine. But he was always so well grounded. He understood that all these opulences, all this material wealth, kingship, all these are very temporary. It's like a dream. And one day what will happen is they will automatically go away. They are not meant to be permanent. And so he was only interested in what was permanent, and that was service unto the Lord. And so Mahārāja Ambarīṣa is said to be the personification of the 7 limbs of bhakti that Prahlad Maharaj gave us. In every respect, he was perfect in all the 7 limbs of bhakti. In all the 7. Srila Prabhupada tells us that if we just perfect one of these 9 limbs, then we have achieved Lord Krishna's lotus feet. There's no doubt about it. But here we see Ambarīṣa Maharaj, his perfection of all 9 limbs of bhakti. Whether you say Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, he used to chant, he used to hear and talk about the glories of Krishna all the time, and he was always in remembrance of the Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said how beautifully he would perform Abhishek of Krishna with all wonderful paraphernalia perfectly with the Brahmanas. He would dress the Lord very beautifully, and he would shower flowers, garlands to Lord Krishna. So, if Vishnu Swaranam, Pada Sevanam, Vandanam, Kirtanam, always worshipping the Lord, Sakhyam, Dasyam, he was always considering himself as a servant of the Lord and his creation, his devotees. He served his citizens so beautifully. He always was very friendly to the citizens, Sakhyam, Dasyam. In that mood, all the citizens were always very Krishna conscious. They were in fact so Krishna consciousness, in so much Krishna consciousness, that the Srimad Bhagavatam describes that they had no other desire but desiring the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the purpose of a king. That is the whole role of the king. That is the main function of the king, is to make the entire citizenship Krishna conscious. And it is said that Ambarīṣa Maharaj, he was exemplary in this. All his citizens were so Krishna conscious that they had no other desire. All the desires were taken care of. They had no other desire but the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So not only he was complete in his Krishna consciousness, but just by his association, his citizens were also completely Krishna conscious. That is the perfection of being a king, a true Kshatriya and a true king who took care of all his citizens. And the last limb is Atma Nivedanam. What to talk about Atma Nivedanam? He was so surrendered to the Lord. He was such a favorite of the Lord that the Srimad Bhagavatam describes that the Lord's disc, the Sudarshana, was like awarded to him by the Lord himself. It was always there to protect Ambarīṣa Maharaj. Can you believe it that the Lord gives his most favorite Sudarshana for the protection of Ambarīṣa Maharaj all the time? And so there was no fear or anxiety of any kind with the Sudarshana there always with you. The Srimad Bhagavatam actually says this, that the Sudarshana was always there to serve Ambarīṣa Maharaj if required, whenever required. And it was required, as we will discuss, and how Ambarīṣa Mahārāja was taken care of. So that's the exalted position of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, that the Lord himself is always there to protect. That's the Atma Nivedanam. So all these 9 limbs of Bhakti provided by Prahlad Maharaj were in perfection as far as Ambarīṣa Mahārāja is concerned. There was no question of any doubt that he was fully surrendered to the Lord. And so in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is this beautiful 3 verses that describe Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. It says, Savaimana Krishna Padaravindayo Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanuvarnane Karau Hare Mandira Marjanadishu Shrutim Chakarachut Achyuta Sat Kathodare Mukunda Lingalaya Darshane Drashau Tatpritya Gatra Sparshyanga Sangamam Granam Chattat Pada Saroja Saurabe Srimat Tulsaya Rasanam Tad Arpite Padau Hare Kshetra Padanu Sarpane Shiro Rishikesha Padavi Vandane Kamam Chandattasya Natu Kama Kamyaya Yathoma Shloka Janashraya Rati. What does that mean? Maharaj Ambarīṣa always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples, and Krishna's dhams or places in Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the senses, in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulsi offered to the Lord. And he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasad. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaj Ambarīṣa never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service in various engagements related to the Lord. That is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and to be completely free from all material desires. Now, this verse is the core verse on which our entire Krishna consciousness is based. What Prabhupada gave us, if you truly look at this verse and all the activities that Prabhupada gave us, from morning doing Mangala Aarti, Tulsi Aarti, then Narsingha Aarti, then Bhagavatam class, then before that, of course, we do the chanting, the Bhagavatam class, and throughout the day, whatever activities people perform in devotional service, everything that Prabhupada gave us is from the example of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. Non-different. Everything is just an example of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. What Ambarīṣa Mahārāja used to do is what we have been given by Srila Prabhupada. So if we just follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions, we will be actually walking on the path of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. We will be engaging every single sense of ours in the service of Krishna. This is the beauty of King Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. His life is an example of perfect Krishna consciousness that Srila Prabhupada gave us. Truly, every sense is engaged in every possible way. And we will discuss this in a little more detail. So basically this verse in the Bhagavatam is description of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja using his all his senses in the service of Sri Krishna himself. And if you remember in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in verse 7.1, if you see in verse 7.1, he says that just by keeping your mind fixed upon me and practicing Krishna consciousness, you will come to me. Because he says in that verse, asamsayam samagram mam Yatha Gyasyasi Tach Shinu. Right? By practicing yoga in full Krishna consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, right? You will come to me. And this is what Ambarīṣa Mahārāja is a personification of. Prabhupada has talked in great detail on this one verse. In fact, I was reading and it is said that Prabhupada talked on Bhagavad Gita 7.1 the most amongst all the verses in all the literatures. Prabhupada talked on 7.1 the most. Why? Because this is what is supposed to be the goal of Krishna consciousness. This is what Krishna consciousness is supposed to be. And so Ambarīṣa Mahārāja is the personification of exactly this. Not different from that verse. Completely using all his senses perfectly in the service of Krishna himself. So in this world of Maya, if you look around, what is there? We are just being tossed about from happiness to distress, more distress and less happiness, but we are continuously in this ocean of misery and happiness. We try to catch on to happiness as long as we can, but then again we are swept away into the next round of misery that is just around the corner. That's what this whole material existence is. So we are constantly tossed about, and the whole purpose, the whole reason I should say for that is our attachment to sense gratification. It's our attachment to sense gratification. Now, we don't want to talk about those who are not in Krishna consciousness because they are in ignorance and they are more attached to sense gratification. But even when we come into Krishna consciousness, it becomes very difficult for us to distinguish between sense gratification and action in the service for the pleasure of Krishna alone. Many a times we perform many types of devotional service, right? We all are engaged in various kinds of devotional activities because we are in Krishna consciousness, and that's very good. We get a benefit for it. But a very sincere devotee has to first analyze that besides the external action, internally, how much is that activity focused on giving pleasure to Krishna? It's a very important aspect of our bhakti. Our advancement in bhakti is dependent on this aspect as to how much are we sincere in performing that activity solely for the pleasure of Sri Radha and Krishna. So there is a subtle sense gratification also involved in bhakti as well. Maya's the last layer of Maya as it is described. When Maya fails in every particular way to distract you from your bhakti, it is said the last layer of Maya is to make you think that you are Krishna, believe it or not, right? It makes you think that you're a great devotee and tries to distract you from being totally focused on Krishna. That subtle sense gratification creeps in, and that kind of becomes a hindrance in our growth in Krishna consciousness. And so we must be careful that we, even in our day-to-day devotional service, we are focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is Krishna is in the center and everything we do is for the pleasure of Krishna. This is very, very important. Otherwise, it becomes not only a sense gratification that I am doing this, I am doing that. When I comes into it, it becomes sense gratification. But the other more important thing is that our activities should not become rituals. when it becomes a ritual, right, then we are performing the activity day to day, hour to hour, minute to a minute, whatever we do. But in that process, we kind of become led away from Krishna, not towards Krishna. We tend to get led away from Krishna. Be very mindful of that. And Ambarīṣa Maharaj was always very conscious of this. Just imagine the position of Ambarīṣa Maharaj, that he was a very opulent king. He had everything that we desire materially, right? We struggle, we work so hard, we want this, we want that, we want every kind of comfort for our families, for whatever other reasons, right? We all struggle so hard, right? And here is Ambarīṣa Maharaj, who has everything, every opulence in the world. He is the king of the world. And yet, he always remained grounded. He always remained focused. He was always very fixated in his Krishna consciousness. He understood that everything comes from Krishna and everything belongs to Krishna. And that these are all resources to be used for the pleasure of Krishna. And because he was always very focused in this, because he knew that all this is so temporary, that none of it will be there with me when I leave this planet. So fixated, he was so fixated in his Krishna consciousness that he would not allow it to become a distraction in his service for the pleasure of Krishna. He would not allow it. And so, as this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam describes, being focused in Krishna consciousness, he used everything in the pleasure of Krishna, especially his senses, because these are the ones, the five senses of the mind are the ones that cause us to fall into illusion. Those are the ones that lead us into bondage. Those are the ones that distract us from the one path that we strictly should follow. And that path is the path of bhakti, leading us to the lotus feet of Krishna. We follow in the path of our acharyas, in the path of our spiritual master, who is always focused on keeping us on that path and bringing us home to God, back to Godhead. So Ambarīṣa Maharaj is very, very focused. And so as it is described, that he used all his senses in the perfection, for the pleasure of Krishna and for achieving perfection in his service to the Lord. And so his only desire was that how can I serve the Lord? His only desire was how can I serve the Lord? As the Bhagavatam describes, he was always thinking about what is the best way, how can I serve the Lord for his pleasure? And he always used to, Prabhupada once said that we must, even if we don't feel love for Krishna, we must pretend, we must actually act as Prabhupada says, we should act, and then with time it will become reality, right? Because if we don't even express our love to Krishna, right, how do we expect to build that love for Krishna? So initially we must pretend if needed. Prabhupada says, pretend and it will become real, right? So Ambarīṣa Maharaj, his love for Krishna was real, but he used to express it. He used to say, I love you, Krishna. Please keep me engaged in your service. And always he was thinking how best to serve so that Krishna is pleased. So that Krishna is pleased. And so these verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam explain how Ambarīṣa Maharaj used to use all his senses in this service of Krishna. So it is said the first thing in his mind, because the mind is really the chief sixth sense, the other five senses can come under control if the mind can come under control. And so he used to always use the mind in remembrance of Krishna. He always was focused on the lotus feet of Krishna, right? And his mind was always under control. He would not allow it to be distracted by anything. Then the next most important sense is the tongue. As the Shastra says, as Rupa Goswami tells us in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu or in the Nectar of Instruction, that if we just control our tongue, then all the other five senses will come under control. All the other five senses will automatically come under control. The tongue is the chief sense that needs to come under control. And the tongue has two functions. First is the sense of taste, and the other is the sense of speech, right? And so it is said Ambarīṣa Mahārāja would not eat anything that was not prasadam, that was not offered to Krishna. He was so strict, he would never eat anything that was not prasadam. And as far as speaking, he was very controlled in his speaking, and everything that he spoke was Krishna conscious. He always spoke about Krishna's glories. He talked about Krishna's pastimes. He was always very surrendered to the Brahmanas who used to advise him. He was always respectful to them. He always took advice from them before he performed any action. All these aspects shows how focused he was in his Krishna consciousness. And then his eyes, he would use his eyes just to see the beautiful form of Krishna. He was always focused on seeing the Lord's deity. He would go to wonderful dhams, Mathura and Vrindavan. He would visit the temples of Krishna. It is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, to see the beautiful form of Krishna. He would use the sense of hearing in hearing the glories of Krishna. Always talking about Krishna through his tongue and hearing the glories of Krishna and his devotees. Even his body was always used for the service of Krishna. His hands were used for performing Abhishekam and for performing other activities for the pleasure of Krishna. Even it said his legs he would use for walking to the temples, for walking in the dhams, and for always using his limbs so that he was always focused on the beautiful form of Krishna, whether it was in the temples, whether it was in the dhams, but he was always mindful of Krishna. And so this example of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, it gives us inspiration. It shows us that although we may be involved in so many different activities in our karmic life, we're all busy. We have families, we have wives, children, those who are married or brahmacharis, they have their own responsibilities. So we have all these different responsibilities and activities in our material life. But Ambarīṣa Mahārāja shows us how we can make all these activities Krishna conscious, how all these activities can be used in the pleasure, for the pleasure of Krishna alone. One may say that, Prabhu, I go to work, and when I work there, I'm so busy, how do I remember Krishna? Well, that activity that you perform, that itself can be made Krishna conscious. If you do that activity sincerely and then use the results from those activities in the service of Krishna. There are so many ways that we can be Krishna conscious. I'll just use a very simple example. I'm giving this a very crude example. I am in IT, okay? I work in IT, all right? And so, when I go to work, I have to log in, and there are so many other areas where I have to authenticate myself, logging into servers, into the network, into this, into that. So many ways, so many times I have to log into so many different things, right? So what do? all my passwords are the different names of Krishna. And so every time I authenticate or log into something, I'm taking the holy names of Krishna. I have, now that we're working from home, my backgrounds are the beautiful form of Krishna. So when this screensaver comes up, I'm seeing Krishna. And otherwise, also since you're working from home, I have Prabhupada's chanting going on, or sometimes I put some kirtan on. But I'm working, it does not disturb me, but the holy name is always entering into my ears. So there are so many ways, if one wants, that one can be Krishna conscious all the time. By just following the example of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, we can be Krishna conscious 24 hours a day. And so that's the reason why King Ambarīṣa Mahārāja is such a wonderful example in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Then, of course, this verse describes that when Ambarīṣa Mahārāja used to use the sense of touch for touching devotees, right? One must always be very loving to the devotees of Krishna. One must always be very mindful and caring for the devotees of Krishna. When you hug a devotee of Krishna, believe it or not, you're actually hugging the Paramatma in the heart of that devotee. And especially if you're hugging the great devotees, the Prabhupada disciples, or even some elevated devotees, you're getting purified by it. And Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, knowing this, he always used to, like it is said, he used to touch the devotees of Krishna. That means he used to hug them. Right? And that's purification. Then you see in the temple, they offer beautiful flowers and tulsi leaves at the lotus feet of the Lord. We should always be aspiring for that, just to get the smell of that lotus feet of the Lord, which gets transferred to that tulsi or the flower. Even if you're not able to go to the temple, I'm sure most of you have deities in your house, or you have the beautiful picture of Radha and Krishna. They are not different. If you offer tulsi leaves or you offer flowers at the lotus feet of the deities, you can take those and smell those. The tulsi leaves, you can eat those. They're so purifying, so beautiful. And so when we go before the deities, whether we are in the temple or we are in our own house before our altar, before our deities, we normally fall flat and offer obeisances to the Lord. Our head is bowed down to the Lord. That's what Ambarīṣa Mahārāja used to do. It is said he always had his head bowed down to the Lord. He used to bow his head, bow down, and put his head on the ground, offering obeisances to Krishna. So every limb of his body from head to toe, he used to use in the service of Krishna. And this is exactly, if you just think about what Prabhupada has given us, exactly what Prabhupada has given us, that's the life of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. That's the life of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. Everything, every activity that Prabhupada has been so merciful and given us, he has given us the opportunity to follow in the path of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. We all have this opportunity. So we should not have any excuse now that we don't have time to practice Krishna consciousness. There should be no excuse whatsoever, because that excuse is basically the lack of enthusiasm to serve the lotus feet of Krishna and to return home back to Godhead. We have no excuse. We just have to be sincere and take Ambarīṣa Mahārāja's example and follow what he is teaching us through his example. That's it. We'll be perfect in this life. And at the end of this life, we will return back to Krishna. There's no doubt about it. We should have no doubt about it at all. So, Mahārāja Ambarīṣa also, whatever activities he performed, all the results from it were also offered at the lotus feet of Krishna. It is said that he had no desire for anything, and so all his activities. So when we perform activities, when we go to work, when we uh, have the results of our activities, we earn a salary or we get money back, we can sanctify that by using it in the service of Krishna. We have nice deities at home, those who do. We can get nice clothes for them, get flower garlands for them, and offer that to Krishna. Take nice care of the deities. We can go to the temple and get darshan of the beautiful deities of the. We are very fortunate that in Atlanta we have Madan Mohana. The whole function of this deity is to give us shelter at the lotus feet. As you know, you have Madana Mohana, you have Govinda Dev, and you have Sri Gopinath, right? Madana Mohana inspires us into service to his lotus feet. So we have the beautiful deities of Sri Madana Mohana in our temple. We have Gaur Nitai, the most merciful. We have Jagannath Baldev Subhadra. So when we get their darshan, when we go to the temple and we bow down before them, it's purification. We can give arati to the deities there. We can give donations to the temple there. We can serve the deities in that way. So all the actions that we perform, they all become transcendental because they're sanctified. It becomes Krishna conscious, it becomes devotional service. So there are so many ways in which we can serve the Lord and be Krishna conscious all the time, like Ambarīṣa Mahārāja used to be. And it said he was always mindful of his citizens. I already talked to you about this. He was always mindful of his citizens. As a king, he always took good care of his citizens. And they were accustomed to chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord, because that's all Ambarīṣa Mahārāja used to talk to them about. He would chant, he would talk to them about the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so it is said, they never aspired to be elevated to the heavenly planets. They didn't even have any aspiration to go to the heavenly planets or to the demigods, because they were so focused on the Supreme Person, Krishna. That's what Ambarīṣa Mahārāja introduced to all his citizens. Perfection of being a king. The perfection of being a king. They had no desire for any other thing but to serve Lord Krishna himself. And of course, it is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that being very pleased by the devotion of Mahārāja Ambarīṣa, Lord Vishnu actually granted Mahārāja Ambarīṣa protection through his Sudarshana. So his Sudarshana was always there to protect Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. Now, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, being a great king, he used to perform a lot of austerities for the welfare of his citizens. He was always mindful, as I said, he was always mindful of his citizen, and so he used to perform a lot of austerities, but only for the pleasure of his citizens. And so it is said that he wanted to observe the vow of Ekadashi and Dwadashi for 1 year. He wanted to observe this for the benefit of the citizens of his kingdom, right? So he and his queen was also very qualified, and so together they wanted to perform this vow of Ekadashi and Dwadashi for 1 year. And so it is said in the month of Kartik, after observing 1 year of Ekadashi, the time came when Mahārāja Ambarīṣa had to break his fast, right? So he performed 3 days of full fasting, and he called the Brahmanas so that they would perform the regulative principles, whatever are required before he would break his vow. He did it perfectly as per the Shastra, so that all the benefit from that fasting would come to his citizens. And so it is said that he invited all the great sages, he invited all the Brahmanas on that day, and he was preparing for the breaking of the fast. And at that time, it is said that Durvasha Muni, one of the great sages, he appeared in that assembly where King Mahārāja, King Ambarīṣa was actually having the ceremony before he would break his fast. And so it is said that when Durvasha Muni came there, King Ambarīṣa was very glad to see him. He welcomed him, he seated him, he took care of him, worshipped him, and then asked him to come and honor prasadam with him. And Durvasha Muni, being a great sage, he wanted to first go through the necessary principles before eating food. So he requested Mahārāja Ambarīṣa that he would go and have a bath in the river, and then he would come back and honor prasadam. And King Ambarīṣa was totally fine with that, and he patiently waited for Durvasha Muni to come back. Now, Durvasha Muni, he took an extremely long time while he was away, and that fast break time was fast approaching. The end of the fast break time was fast approaching. As all of you know, when you observe Ekadashi, there's a specific time when you have to break the fast. If you don't break the fast within that specific time, then the whole Ekadashi that you have observed, you lose it. You do not get the benefit of it. There's a reason why Ekadashi has to be broken in this particular time. When it is broken at that time, that is the auspicious time. And when you break the fast, when you break that Ekadashi fast in that time, then you get the entire benefit of that Ekadashi fast. And so with Durvasha Muni having been gone for such a long time, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja was in a kind of a quandary. He was kind of troubled that what should I do? If I break my fast, then I would have, according to the scriptures, broken the rule that a visiting Brahmana first should be honored, should be fed and taken care of before the host actually honors prasadam. And here is Durvasha Muni, who is such a great sage. And so dishonoring him would be an offense on the part of King Ambarīṣa. And so he was kind of in a quandary as to what should I do. And so he talked to the assembled Brahmanas, right? He talked to the assembled Brahmanas and asked them what is the proper thing to do. First of all, I cannot allow my fast to go in vain, because the whole purpose of this fast is for the benefit of my citizens. It's not for my benefit. And so whatever happens to me, it doesn't matter, as long as my citizens are benefited by my fast, by this fast that I have kept. I cannot allow that to go waste. And at the same time, I have to follow the Shastras as well and honor my guest. I cannot dishonor my guest. And so honoring my guest means breaking my fast. And if I don't break my fast, then it is a waste of all this 1 year of austerities that I have performed. And so in consultation with the Brahmanas, it was agreed that he could have water. He could have some water. And that would not be considered as dishonoring his guest, and at the same time it would be considered as breaking his fast. And so both the purposes would be served. So taking permission from the Brahmanas, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja drank some water. And when Durvasha Muni returned, then by his mystic powers, he came to know that Ambarīṣa Mahārāja has already honored prasadam, and he was very angry. Durvasa Muni was very angry because he felt disrespected. He felt that he was dishonored by the king. And in his anger, Durvasa Muni is very famous for cursing and creating a lot of challenges for the person who's the recipient of his anger. And so here too, it is said in the Srimad Bhagavatam that Durvasa Muni pulled a clump of hair from his head and throwing it on the ground, he created a demon out of it. And that demon was ordered to destroy Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. That is the anger of Durvasa Muni. But as you all know, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja was not at all disturbed by this. Not even for a moment was Ambarīṣa Mahārāja disturbed by it. Because he was in constant remembrance of Hari. He was in constant remembrance of Krishna. And as soon as this demon approached Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, who was protected by the Sudarshana appeared and destroyed this demon, beheaded this demon, destroyed it immediately. And then it turned towards Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni, seeing that his effort, this demon created by him, had been destroyed, he immediately understood that now he is in trouble. He is in he has committed a big offense against a devotee of the Lord. And the Sudarshana itself has come to protect Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. And so he started running away from there. He runs and runs. He tries to hide in caves in the Sumeru mountains, as it is said. But the Sudarshana was following him so close that the heat of the Sudarshana, it is said, was burning him. And he ran, he found no way to where to go. So he went to Brahma and sought shelter at Brahma's feet, asking him to protect him from the Sudarshana. And Brahma said, even I am temporary. When this second kala, this second part of the day, of my day starts, I am also done for. I cannot protect myself. What can I protect you from the Sudarshana, right? So I cannot do anything. And so Durvasa runs from Brahma to Shiva, hoping that Shiva is an exalted personality. I'm sure that Shiva will be able to help me. But when he comes to Shiva, Shiva also says this entire creation is the creation by the Supreme Lord, Lord Vishnu. And when it's time to end, he is the one who destroys everything. And there's nothing we can do about it, right? So this Sudarshana comes from Lord Vishnu himself. Even we are powerless. There's nothing we can do about it. And so if you want protection from the Sudarshana, you should go to Lord Vishnu himself. And hearing this, Durvasa Muni runs to Lord Vishnu and falls at his feet and starts begging for his mercy, asking him to protect him. He glorifies Lord Vishnu and asks for his protection. And then Lord Vishnu, he gives this wonderful example to Durvasa Muni. He says, I am under the control of my devotees. I am under the control of my devotees. Just as a chaste woman, right, she brings her husband under control by serving him, right? These devotees of mine, they have full control over me because they serve me, giving up everything for me. They give up everything, their whole life they give up, whatever they possess, even their life they give up for me, right? So I'm under full control of my devotees, fully controlled by my devotees. He says, Sadhavo hridayam mayam, sadhunam hridayam toham, mad anyate na janati, naham tebhyo managapi. I'm fully under the control. The pure devotee is always within the core of my heart. And I am always in the heart of my pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything else but me. And I know no one else but them. So I am under the full control of the devotees. And then he chastises Durvasha. He says, for a Brahmana, austerity and learning are certainly auspicious. But when acquired by a person who is not gentle means not caring. He has acquired all this through auspiciousness, right? All this learning and all his empowerment, whatever empowerment he has. Like the Vashamani was empowered where he could just pull hair from his head and create a divan, right? But if he's not gentle, such austerity and learning are very dangerous. So indirectly, Lord Vishnu is chastising Durvasha. He says, by offending Mahārāja Ambarīṣa, you have acted with self-envy. This is self-envy. You are envious of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. Otherwise, why would you act in this way? And then he says, it is the subject and not the object who is harmed when used against a devotee. What that means is that when you, out of your envy, try to harm a devotee, that harm comes back to you. You are the subject and the object is Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. But your envy makes you the object of that envy. And that is the reason why now you are being chased by this Sudarshana, who is protecting my greatest devotees, my greatest devotee. He says, oh Brahmana, now there's only one way. You have to go to this wonderful devotee of mine, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, and fall at his feet. For it is only he who can save you from my Sudarshana. Even I cannot save you. It is only Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, who has been the subject of your envy, who can save you from this Sudarshana. I cannot. And understanding this now, Durvasha, immediately he runs back to Mahārāja Ambarīṣa. Now, if you want to know the greatness of Mahārāja Ambarīṣa, when Durvasha Muni ran away with the Sudarshan chasing him, Mahārāja Ambarīṣa could have easily broken his fast. But knowing that Durvasha Muni will be coming back, he still did not honor Prashadam, waiting for Durvasha Muni to return. And it is said it took 1 year. Durvasha Muni ran all over to Brahma, to Shiva, to Vishnu. And by the time he came back, it was 1 year. And so Mahārāja Ambarīṣa had fasted for another 1 year, waiting for Durvasha to come back. And when Durvasha came back and fell at the feet of Mahārāja Ambarīṣa, right? Ambarīṣa never had any kind of, somebody harms you, then you feel so antagonistic towards them, right? But no, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja was so elevated that he had no kind of misgivings for Ambarīṣa, for Durvasha. In fact, when Durvasha, it is said, fell at his feet, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja was feeling very uncomfortable. There's such a great sage is falling at my feet. And when he was glorifying him, Ambarīṣa Mahārāja could not take it. He was feeling so awkward, so awkward. He felt so unqualified for this glorification by Durvasha. And he immediately started praying to Sudarshana. He glorifies Sudarshana. He glorifies Sudarshana and prays to Sudarshana. Please, please. Now the words that Durvasha Muni uses are very significant, very beautiful when he's praying to the Sudarshana. He says that if in my lifetime I have performed any kind of ceremonies or any kind of austerities for the pleasure of the Lord, right? Then please use the benefit of that for forgiving this Brahmana. If I have done anything that you consider, Sudarshan is not different from the Lord himself, right? If there's anything that you consider, I have done some good karma that I have done for the pleasure of the Lord, for your pleasure, then please give the benefit of that to Durvasha Muni and please spare his life. Please spare him. Just see the position of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. He is not only not having any misgivings for Durvasha Muni, but at the same time, his compassion is exemplary. He's ready to give up everything that he has to save this Brahmana. Anything that is due to him, any benedictions that are coming to him, or any kind of favor that is coming to him from the Lord, he is ready to use it at this time to save this Brahmana from this Sudarshana. And it is said, because of his wonderful prayers, the Sudarshana then recedes and Durvasha Muni is saved. And Durvasha Muni then glorifies Ambarīṣa Mahārāja in various ways. He says, I am very pleased with you, my dear king. At first, I thought of you as an ordinary human being and accepted your hospitality. But later I could understand by my own intelligence that you are the most exalted devotee of the Lord. Therefore, simply by seeing you, touching your feet and talking with you, I have been pleased and become obliged to you. And saying this, he glorified, paid his obeisances, and he returned. The Durvasha Muni left, right? And so it is said that King Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, of course, before Durvasha Muni had left, he fed him sumptuously, fed him very nicely, took very good care of him. And then Durvasha Muni, being happy, he returned, right? So it is said because of his devotional service, Maharaj Ambarīṣa was endowed with all kinds of transcendental qualities. He was completely aware of the different aspects of the Lord, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan forms. He was totally aware and he executed devotional service with perfection. And because of his devotion, he understood that this material world is of no use to him. And so he distributed all his kingdom, all his property to his sons who were qualified now, and he left home. And then it is said that he achieved perfection and returned back to the spiritual world, being fully mindful of Lord Krishna. This is the perfection of Mahārāja Ambarīṣa's life. That in every situation, good or bad, in challenging situations or in situations of pleasure, happiness, he remained equipoised. Nothing disturbed him. And he performed such wonderful austerities for the pleasure of the Lord. Yet he was put through a challenge where Durvasha Muni almost caused a major disaster by upsetting his Ekadashi fast. But in spite of that, being protected by the Lord, he came out of it in perfection. And so we can use this beautiful description of King Ambarīṣa Mahārāja in Srimad Bhagavatam as our guiding light and a way to achieve perfection in Krishna consciousness. Even though we may be so materially involved in our activities, in our responsibilities, but he shows us that we can be Krishna conscious no matter which situation we are put in. There's absolutely no excuse for not being Krishna conscious, no matter which situation we are put in, because all these situations are actually created for us, for our own purification. If we just accept this, if we just take shelter of the Lord, then we will achieve perfection in this lifetime itself. We are so fortunate that we have Srila Prabhupada with us. We are so fortunate that Prabhupada has given us everything that we need to lead a life like Mahārāja Ambarīṣa. There's nothing that we don't have. Everything has been given to us. Taking advantage of this blessing that we have received from our Param Guru Srila Prabhupada, we can achieve perfection by just following in the path of Mahārāja Ambarīṣa. And so I'm very grateful to the authorities in ISKCON temple and very grateful to the organizing committee for giving me this chance to talk about the glories of Shri Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. By just talking to him, I'm sure that I will receive the blessings of Shri Ambarīṣa Mahārāja. It will purify me some so that I may be able to serve the devotees of Lord Krishna in whatever little way I can. Thank you all so much. Please forgive me if I have said something that is inaccurate because I'm a human. I have all the four deficiencies that comes with it. And if I have said something that's not pleasing, please forgive me for my most humble obeisances to all you Vaishnavas. And I sincerely pray that Krishna may always shelter and protect you all. Hare Krishna, Dandavats Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful narration and lessons that you've given us through the pastime of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, as you mentioned. So many lessons that we can take on how we can think about Krishna in our daily life, even in small activities that we do. So, Prabhu, you have a few minutes for a couple of questions, maybe?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
So if any devotees have any questions, you can please raise your hand. I see one hand already. So Divya Agarwal Mataji, please go ahead and ask a question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Dandavats Pranam.
Yeah, when you mentioned that we should do everything for the pleasure of Krishna, but like when we chant, I can talk for myself that I chant because it gives me pleasure and happiness. So I'm just wondering, how would you define that? What kind of would that be like something that we are doing for our pleasure or Krishna's pleasure?
That is a very good question. Divya Mataji, that is a very good question. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Suridam susukham kartum avyayam. What that means is that Krishna consciousness is always pleasurable. Krishna consciousness cannot be giving you any kind of despair or distress or any kind of stress. Krishna consciousness is always pleasurable. So when we serve the Lord, right, the Lord is pleased, and if the Lord is pleased, then we are pleased. So when we feel real ecstasy and happiness, that too comes from the source, from Krishna himself. He is seated in our heart. If we are sincere in that devotional service, we will feel ecstasy, we will feel happiness, because that is a reflection of the happiness that Krishna feels because of the service that you perform for him. That's why in the Bhagavad Gita it says, Susukham kartum avyayam. If you're not enjoying Krishna consciousness, if Krishna consciousness is not pleasurable, then there's something wrong in that activities that we are performing. It will always be blissful and give happiness. So don't feel that it is sense gratification. The only thing is that Krishna is bhavagrahi. If you're sincere, that's what matters. That you're doing it for Krishna's pleasure. And then you will feel that same pleasure. Krishna reciprocates. Krishna never takes anything and now doesn't give back. So if Krishna is happy, you can be sure that you will feel that same happiness. And so don't feel that is sense gratification. If you're sincere, you're fine, right? So that's Krishna reciprocating, all right?
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the wonderful answer. Do any other devotees have any other questions? We have Shubham Mataji. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, thank you so much for your wonderful class today. I learned so much and just very appreciative and grateful to have your association. And Prabhuji, one question that came to my mind was, I thought it stuck out really, this amazing quality of Ambarīṣa Mahārāja, how he was able to remain so calm, even when such a huge calamity, came upon him. And I know for me, any small thing that happens, it's such a, big deal. So how can we develop this trait or even try to develop an ounce of that when some calamity strikes? How do we remain fixed in our Krishna consciousness and also just steadfast? Thank you, Prabhuji.
Sure. We have to follow the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. He is our Param Guru, and he answers every question that we may have in his example, in his lifetime, as well as in his teachings, in his Lilamrita, in every way. Srila Prabhupada has provided us with every resource so that we can achieve what Ambarīṣa Mahārāja achieved. So to answer your question, we have to keep in mind that everything is based on our sincerity. If we are sincere in our sadhana means what? Our daily devotional service that we perform in terms of performing Mangala Arati, Tulsi Puja, Narsimha Arati, in our chanting, in listening to Bhagavatam class or reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And reading the Bhagavad Gita in the evenings. If we are very sincere in our sadhana, then these qualities, they manifest. It's not that these qualities are not in us. Since we are part and parcel of Krishna, we have the same qualities. He is Vibhu and we are Anu. We are in very small quantity, he is unlimited. But we all have that same qualities, but it is being covered by our material attachments and our contamination in this material world. So this sadhana that we perform, that Prabhupada has given us, is what is actually manifesting these qualities. As the Bhagavad Gita describes the qualities of a Brahmana, right? That is for a devotee also. Those qualities, they manifest through this sadhana. And when our sadhana is very strong, our sadhana is sincere, then these qualities, they manifest. It's not that today I will sit down and say, today I'm going to work on tolerance. The next day I say, today I'm going to work on gratitude. Third day I will say, today I'm going to work on my forgiveness. It won't happen. It's not easy. You cannot just work to achieve it, You have to allow those qualities that are within you to surface. They're already there. You just have to allow it to surface. And for it to surface, you need shelter of Guru and Gauranga. You need the Guru's mercy and you need Gauranga's mercy. And that is achieved through proper sadhana, through following the instructions of our Guru and Param Guru, and also through very sincere sadhana. So when our sadhana is sincere, then these qualities manifest. They automatically manifest. There will be love you'll feel the love for the devotees of the Lord. You'll feel the love for the Lord himself, right? And from that love will manifest all these qualities of tolerance, forgiveness, gratitude. They will all come about. But the core source, I should say, of everything is sincere sadhana. When we do sincere sadhana, then all of this starts manifesting. I hope I answered your question, Shubha Mataji.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It really, really helps so much and exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So once again, Prabhu, we thank you for your wonderful class and also wonderful answers that you gave to the questions that the devotees asked. As usual, it's amazing to hear about so many devotees of the Lord and how they've acted, and the lessons we can take away on how we can implement some of these lessons and grow in our spiritual journeys, which is very important. So once again, we thank you for you giving us your time. And now we will move on to the announcements for today.
Very grateful, Prabhuji, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
And if I went a little over time, please forgive me, Prabhuji. Sometimes I lose track of time and I have to correct that. Please forgive me.
I think when we discuss Krishna Katha, sometimes we get absorbed in it, and it's so sweet that we don't even realize it. So it's always a pleasure to hear about the devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So moving on to our announcements. So this coming Sunday, again, programs are still virtual, and we'll have Her Grace Radhabha Mataji giving a class. The timing is 4:30 p.m. And next week, we have His Grace Jayakumar Prabhu, who will be giving a class on Sudama Brahmana, who's also another wonderful example of a devotee of the Lord, who was so simple and so much nectar and beauty in their pastime as well. Apart from that, as you all know, the temple is open for darshan, but not for any programs. So if you would like to go and have darshan, the timings are 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. So if you would like to go and have darshan, please ensure that you have masks. I think there are masks at the temple, and social distancing protocols are being followed as well. Apart from that, I think a lot of devotees have been testing positive for COVID. So we will be praying for all these devotees, starting with His Holiness Jayaptak Maharaj, who was tested positive for COVID today. We also heard that Loknath Maharaj tested positive for COVID. His Holiness Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj also tested positive. Nandasutta Prabhu from Atlanta as well. Also, let's pray for the health of Her Grace Govardhan Leela Mataji and Revati Mataji, and all the doctors who are fighting COVID, many other devotees who have tested positive, who we haven't been able to mention, and so many other people who are suffering due to various health problems due to the current pandemic situation. So let's chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra 3 times. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Once again, you can follow us on WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram for updates on our programs. So please stay tuned and join us for our following programs on Sunday and Wednesday. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.